in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia SBDC's webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's webinar is Writing Email Messages That Work. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, web and mobile strategist, author of So Low Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here for the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. As Tracy said, today we'll be talking about writing email messages that work. And as Tracy said, there's the question panel. Of course, feel free to ask those questions now while I'm live here on the webinar. But of course, after the webinar, if you still have questions, go ahead and check out Twitter. You can go ahead and send questions at W3 Consulting, hashtag those Beyond Google, and I'll know those are questions about this webinar and be able to answer those. And of course, follow Virginia SBDC for future announcements as well as other information and resources that the Virginia Small Business Development Center Network puts out there for the small business community. So today's agenda is really going to be talking about email, and we're not really focusing specifically on email marketing, although it really is all part and parcel of it. We want to talk about really writing email messages in a business context, both for marketing operations and management purposes, so that we really make sure that they are effective for our purposes. So we're going to talk about why email or why not email. You know, there are times when to use email and when not to. We're going to talk about timing and recipients, and then of course writing subjects. So what I talk about in my full-day workshops called subjects and subjects. The subjects of the email as well as the subject heading of the email itself. And we'll talk about the actual message. What are you trying to get across in the body content or the body copy of the email messages? And then we'll end with email signatures, and we'll talk about any questions or answer any questions, not only throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, but also I'll leave a little bit of time at the end for us to be able to cover those. So that's the agenda. Let's head right into some information about email. So why email or not? Let's start off with some basic statistics. You know, there's 3.3 billion email accounts today. I mean, these numbers are a little bit old, so there's probably about 3.4-ish billion email accounts today. And so we're going to see somewhere upwards of 4.3 billion by the time 2016 rolls around. We send roughly about 140 million messages. I guess it's around probably 120 million right now. But we're expected to hit 143 million email messages per day in a business context. If you can imagine, for a small business owner as yourself, that's a lot of email messages if you take that in the incremental average per business per day. And we really want to be able to cut those messages down, and we want to make them more effective. And so that's sort of the point of what I want to talk about today is how do we really reduce the number of email messages? And that first thing is to ask the question, why email in the first place? There's some really good reasons to email, and there's some really bad reasons to decide to shoot an email out as opposed to using another method. So my first question always when I sit down in front of my email software is email the appropriate medium? Is for some reason, you know, if the email message, if I decide I've got to send an email, I have to always think, is this going to really affect a couple of things? And those things are you going to get to the right person by writing that email message? Most often than not, we think that by sending an email message, it's going to get to the right person. But many times in business today, people have many different aliases. Aliases are actually, just to dissect it for you, you know, there's my name, Ray, then there's the @ symbol, and then there's the domain for my business, w3cinc.com. Well, w3cinc.com is the domain. What precedes the @ symbol, the Ray, well, I have many of those. You know, Ray happens to be the public one that you see when people see things on my website or on my marketing materials and that kind of thing. But I could very easily forward that alias to any number of other staff members. I could not even have it come to me. I could have it come to an assistant or somebody else in my company to block, you know, outbound or outward-facing, you know, communications. So we really want to pay attention to the fact that even though it says my name on it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get to me. So writing email sometimes is not the best medium there, because you might not get to the right person even if you think that that's their email. Next up is, are you helping or hurting your business by sending that email? Are you sending an unsolicited request from somebody? Are you going to really get your outcome that you're looking for, which I'll talk about in a moment? But really think about, am I helping or hurting my business here by sending that email? These can happen if you have rather emotionally charged feelings when you write the email, if it's something that you really want, or it's just or something that you really need. Those two are absolutely independent thoughts, and we have to really keep those in mind when we're sending email. If it's something that you need, then the email might be appropriate. Even then, you might still need to make a phone call as opposed to shooting off an emotionally charged or long and complicated or highly confidential message to someone. Those are all appropriate for maybe a phone call or face-to-face, as opposed to sending it by digital means. And we really want to think about, when we talk about, do we really want something or do we really need something, how will the recipient respond when they receive that message? So put yourself into the shoes of the person who's going to be receiving that email message and think, if I received this as an email, how would I feel about it? So with that in mind, we really want to sort of segue immediately into, because we have a lot to talk about, is timing and recipients. So in the grand scope of things, we really want to think about sending messages once we decided that email is the appropriate mechanism. We're going to send the email, okay? Now we have to really think about starting off with, when are we going to send this email? And normally people want to think about who are we going to send the email to, but we should really think about those together. We want to really think about them concurrently, because really timing makes a lot of difference. So let's think about time zones. Right now, we're in different time zones potentially. And if you send an email at 10 a.m. and I happen to be 2 time zones away, well, by the time that email message reaches me, your email message might be buried behind many, many other email messages, which of course dictates whether or not I'm going to receive your message. So we really want to think about time zones as it relates to open rates as well as speed of response. So a couple of pointers, I guess, about this. When you're dealing with a consumer audience, they typically work a 9 to 5. When you're dealing with a small business or a business audience, those folks tend to read their emails before office hours, so they read a little bit earlier, maybe between 7 and 9 o'clock, and then they read a little bit afterwards, so between 6 and 9 p.m. You then have better open rates as well as speed of response when you pay attention to those things. So those are sort of the triangle of things. What time zone am I in? Who are the people that I'm communicating with? And do I want the email just open and read, or do I really want a response? If I just want the email open and read, perhaps I'm going to send it after the 9 o'clock hour in their time zone, where they might be, just sitting down to their office, and they don't have decision fatigue. 10 people haven't run into their office with fires yet to put out. They have the opportunity to really give your email a proper perspective, but they're likely not to respond to it except during those beginning early morning or late evening, sort of after everybody has left the office, and they can finally deal with those more pressing issues where, okay, I need to respond to this message, but I don't have time for it right now, so I'm going to deal with it after those. I see that somebody might have a question. If you have a question, Tracy will pop in and feel free to interrupt me. So the next item is, as you're thinking about this, okay, when do most people, open their emails? When do most people respond to their email messages, and what time zone are those people in? Now I'm going to think about who am I emailing, okay? Am I emailing direct report? Am I emailing people outside the company? Am I emailing clients? Really contextualize for yourself who you're emailing so that you're capable of figuring out whether or not your email will be effective at all, okay? So this really comes back to that question of whether you send the email message at all. But now that you've decided that you're going to send the email message, sending it to the appropriate parties is always going to be important. So knowing who you're emailing is really going to help you figure that out. The University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, they have a great email article that talks about, how to send an email usually for students and professors and so on and so forth, but it really works for everyone in the sense that they say that you should really think about the overarching mission of the email message before you even, sort of sit down to write the email. And when you have that perspective in mind, a little bit of, it slows you down a little bit, but it also gives you that perspective of, okay, who am I emailing, and what's the outcome that I'm looking for from there? And that will really help gauge whether or not you need to include other people in the email message, or whether you need to write it to someone else. So that can be a really important decision point. And then that usually comes to CC or not to BCC, and that really is the answer. So in general, don't BCC anyone. It's counterproductive in so many ways to BCC folks. There are a couple of reasons why you might BCC folks, and I'll explain them just shortly. So to, CC, and BCC are the three fields that email programs give you in order to send an email message to a recipient. The to field is for anyone who's receiving the email that you're addressing them. They'll say, Dear Sally, and that is going to be the to. Now, in the to line can be multiple people, obviously, but you don't ever put in the to line everyone that's supposed to be receiving an email message for those folks who are, even if those folks are not making any action or desired any response from within that message. So if there's no action or response necessary, then those people are taken out of the to line and they are put in the CC line, which comes from the old carbon copy date. So it's an acronym for carbon copy from the days in which we used to have typewriters and paper, and we actually used to make carbon copies. And so we have the CC. So no action, no response necessary. It's just for your information only kind of information. Then they get put in the CC. Okay. Now, if you were to send a larger blanket email message, but you didn't want to expose the people's email messages to one another, that's when you would use the BCC line. And that's pretty much the only time you would use a BCC. So you would have the opportunity to say, I want to introduce, Joe and Sally to one another. Well, I'm not going to expose their email addresses to one another yet because I haven't got permission to do so. So what am I going to do? I'm going to send an email, to myself, perhaps, I'll put myself in the to line just so that it's not empty, and then I'll copy both of them and say, will you please respond back to me and give me permission to expose your email addresses to one another, but I'd really like to introduce you for X or Y reasons. Well, great. Now they know, they can give you permission, and now you can expose that information subsequent to them giving that authorization. Another reason why you might want to BCC is to actually copy yourself. So frequently I will copy myself or other web services or email services that I might want that email message to arrive in. So if you want to copy yourself on that and you don't want to expose that email address to someone, you could use the BCC line, but never use it for for subterfuge or some kind of reason to hide the fact that you're sending an email to someone else in a business context. It will frequently come back to haunt you, and you just don't want to do that. Okay, so in a business context, BCC is pretty much is a not to BCC rule. Okay, and that takes us along to writing subject lines, and this is where I really want to spend a good portion of our discussion, because it matches so many parts of both email marketing, email operations, and many times as a function of marketing, the social media components of your business. So let's talk about subjects. Subject lines are the messages that appear when you open up your email message. And so some email programs like Gmail or Outlook and whatnot will show you the from, who sent it from, date and time of receipt or sending of the email, depending upon the program, but usually it's the date of sending, and the date of receipt shows in the field, and then it shows you this subject line. And that line is, of course, the subject line that the person, the sender, writes in the message, and that's your first indication usually about the context of the email message. And so as a writer, as a sender of email, you really have to think about the subject lines as being one of the most important and crucial parts of writing email. In a marketing perspective, it absolutely is. It's what makes people open email. I mean, that's what's going to allow someone to open up an email message. They're going to see value and they're going to open it, or they're going to not see value and they're not going to open it. But on the other side, in just business-to-business context, every day I have to filter through hundreds of messages. And when I'm receiving hundreds of messages, I've got to decide which ones are going to be more important for me. And so the subject lines are really going to be important. So caveat number one is never send an email message with no subject. I absolutely can't believe that that's still sent today, but frequently I see messages where there's no subject line whatsoever, and someone just shoots off a message in the body of the email, and I don't give it the time of day. If you didn't give me the respect to, understand that I need to understand why you're writing to me in the first place, if you didn't fill out the subject line, then I'm likely not to even read the message. It's going to get filtered and thrown into the junk mail, just by nature of my email program. And even if it doesn't, get filtered by my junk mail and actually shows up in my inbox, I'm also not going to give it first priority, because other people have written more effective subject lines, and they've captured my attention with value. And so they're telling me there's a context that's important to me, and therefore I need to go check it out. And so I'm going to open those email messages first, which means you're going to get thrown to the bottom of the pile, even if you are chronologically higher up in the chart of hierarchy and in the chronology of receipt of the email messages. So really think about that. Subject lines are so powerful, and think about this also in the way in which newspaper magazines and other periodicals work. It's the very flashy headline that appears on the cover of a magazine that gets you to buy the magazine in the first place. You grab it off the impulse purchase stands at the grocery store or at the market, and you pick it up because it says something on there. Top 10 ways to lose 5 pounds before you go on vacation. Whatever it might be, it's gonna make you want to pick up that item and say, I want to do this. I want to engage with this content. And the subject lines are just headlines for another context. So really think about subject lines from that perspective, and it'll start helping the paradigm of really crafting good headlines. Some other things to pay attention to is that good headlines, as I frequently talk about in public seminars, is that they're just like tweets. I mean, Twitter, is basically a headline. It's all headline writing. So if you think about subject lines in email, headlines in a newspaper, magazine, or periodical, and Twitter tweets, and then we can throw in, Pinterest posts, Pinterest descriptions, Instagram descriptions, LinkedIn posts, Facebook posts. All of those are really just different ways in which we're headline writing. And so it really beefs up your marketing acumen by learning to write in a succinct manner that gets people to be called to action, which means this is of value and I need to open it. Okay, so I can't impress upon you how important this is for all of our businesses, but think about it in the way in which it can really help you get your email opened first. So one of the first things that I always talk about is the short and what's in it for me, WIIFM. So you want people to, it's an acronym, the tune into the radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me. So when you write a subject line, think about what's in it for the recipient. What's going to make them know that this email message is going to be worth them opening it. We don't always want to think about people as being selfish, but the reality is that most people are self-interested, and they're unaware of it most of the time. And even if they are aware of it, they still should be, I suppose. We have to protect our time, and we also have to protect our own business interests as well as our own personal interests. So why wouldn't we only open up email messages first, or giving primary attention to the ones that provide us with the most value? So one is WIIFM. What's in it for me? Think about what's in it for them, your customer, your business colleague, your vendor, your whomever, and write the subject line to tell them what they're going to get out of it. Next is be short. This is both a technical issue as well as really all the other things that I was talking about before. Being concise, being succinct are just good, appropriate mechanisms for writing good headlines. But the other side is that some of the email browsers, email software, and also the webmail tools, they only give you so much space, sometimes less than 150 to 160 characters, to be able to affect a subject line. And when you do write the subject line, they then are shortened or shrunk based on the size of the screen. So you may only have 50 characters, sometimes even 20 characters on a mobile phone in order to be able to get the person's attention. So make sure that you're writing rather short subjects, and the subjects also need to have a verb added. So you need to really kick it off with a verb. What's going to be that active verb that's going to catch my attention? It's gonna really get me to go, okay, that's something that's going to happen to me. That's something that I can do. It's something that you want to really make sure that is there, so people know that they're going to get value out of it. So make it short and make sure it's what's in it for them. I've already talked about how headlines are really just subjects, so we're good to go there. If we have any questions about subjects, feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions about subject lines. They're a really important part of it. All right, so I wanted to talk about the actual message itself. And body copy in email we could literally talk about for days and days and days. But we only have so much time, so I want to talk about really putting together email message body copy that works. And at the end of this seminar, I'm going to actually read something called the email charter, and that's going to go over some other things that I think are really handy. So I'm going to read that at the end, but I'm going to go over the body copy now. So once we get through who we're sending it to, the subject line, they finally open the message, right? And so they're not going to see the substantive content of the body of the email, and we want to really now outline to them what we're all about, what we want, and ask them to give it to us, right? So the first thing you're going to do is start with your reason for writing up front. One of the first things I learned when I started in the law office was to write right up front at the top of your email message, the reason for me writing to you today, the reason for this letter, the reason for this correspondence is, and then fill in the blank. And it's there's no salutation other than, dear Mr. or Mrs., dear, so-and-so. That's, you just start the first sentence off with exactly what this message is about, so that you're cutting to the chase. You always have an opportunity to provide, background and support materials and evidence in a subsequent paragraph. But you really need to start with why you're writing up front. If you try any kind of floweriness, and so forth, usually in business emails, you are going to find yourself, consistently flummoxed by people delaying response and not really getting, feeling like that you're getting to the point, and so therefore, they're gonna delay their responses. So what's your reason for writing right up front? Next up is really so important, which is making sure that your email messages are free of grammar and spelling errors. I know that most email programs support give you a summary of spelling check, and it tells you that it's done a spell check, but many times it doesn't know whether or not you've incorrectly used to, or to, or then or than. Being able to make sure that you're using the correct words, and also sometimes you might flub and put in British spelling of a particular word instead of English, and it won't even notice that. So we really need to be paying attention to the grammar and spelling within email. And so I'm going to show you a couple of tools that you can use in order to really make sure that your email messages are buttoned up when it comes to email. I'm not saying that this is going to be for an email message where you're writing one sentence and responding to someone. But if you're writing a rather long message, say several paragraphs, and this is a really important message, then these three tools are things that I think would really help. And so I'm going to jump out of the presentation right now and take you over to them so that you can see. The first of them is called PaperRater. And PaperRater is a free tool that allows you to go into this little tool here. You go to paperrater.com. So it's P-A-P-E-R-R-A-T-E-R, like, rating a paper, PaperRater. And you literally just copy the text of the email that you're going to write, or you can write the email right here in PaperRater, and just go ahead and type it. So I'm going to type in just a series of letters just so you can see here. And I scroll down, and it's a free tool, so you don't really have to, pay for it. And then you select, grade level, which, I don't know why they require you to put in a grade level. So we're going to put in grade level, We're going to put in the type of paper. In this case, it's the first one, which is a business correspondence. So it's business correspondence. You can ask it to do a plagiarism detection, which I'm guessing you don't need to do. And it tells you the default language in which you're writing. It asks you to agree to the terms of service, which is basically them telling you that they're going to be using this data to, give you back information, so it's running over the internet. They don't keep any of the material on the server anyway, so it's not that big of a risk. But you can see here that they look at it and they say, okay, here goes any errors that we're finding, and so on and so forth. You can see that it's ad supported, but just ignore the ads. If I wrote a more substantive email message, or if I wrote actually an email message here, it would actually give me here on the right-hand side far more in-depth messaging. In each of these sections, it pops out and you can see it'll tell you, oh, these are problems that you're having, these are grammar errors. It'll tell you how sophisticated your writing is versus not. You can see here every time it has a red underline and highlighted item, it means that there's something wrong with that word, and it gives you the opportunity to go ahead and fix it. Okay, so it gives you suggestions, you can ignore suggestions, and so you can really make sure that both from a grammar perspective as well as a spelling perspective, you're cleaning up your email messages. So really, really great tool. I really like PaperRater for being able to do, sort of long messages that I'm really trying to craft appropriately. Next up, and it also gives you a printable summary too, so you can print a summary out and so on and so forth. The next tool that I really like is actually related to PaperRater because it's built by the same folks, and this one's called Ginger. And Ginger is a spell checker and grammar checker, and this one's great because it can work in Gmail and it can work in the Google Apps interface for mail and other kinds of webmail tools. So whatever website you're in, and remember that email doesn't just happen in your normal email software. It may happen when you're trying to forward something via social media, or if you were reading something in the New York Times website or the Washington Post and you decide to forward that to a colleague. Well, in those fields, it's going to take the words you put in there and it's going to send an email to your recipient. Well, those email messages should be dealt with the same way you would deal with a normal business correspondence from your email software. So you need to go through the same exact mechanisms of who am I writing to, when am I sending this, because I'm reading this now at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. I'm going through my normal reading routine. Well, wait a second, it's 6:30 in the morning. Is this really the most appropriate time for me to be sending this to the person? When are they going to receive it? What should I do about that? Who's going to receive it? Am I sending it to this business colleague, or am I going to send it to a group of business colleagues? And so on and so forth. So you see what I mean? What's the subject line going to be when the email goes out? Is it going to be something that's going to be opened? And now we get to the body copy, and in most of those systems, it doesn't have a spell check. So Ginger steps in here by being this all-purpose spelling and grammar checker that is actually built into your browser. So you just go into the browser, you click on the install function for whichever browser you have, it installs, and now you just have the little G up there that it shows on screen right now, or you just start typing in the system and it will start to pick up, oh, you meant to have parallel syntax, or you used the wrong word, like I used the example earlier of to, and to, or then and than, those kinds of things. It starts to pick up on those errors, and it also corrects live in the websites when you're using text speak. So many times we tend to write on mobile phones today, and we start to use acronyms and little shorthand words when we're on our mobile phones, and those sometimes bleed over into our regular email correspondence, which we shouldn't do. So it goes ahead and catches those and fixes them for us. I really like Ginger. It's a great tool for that kind of thing. So I recommend that you check it out. And then next is actually Google Docs. So Google Docs is a fantastic tool for being able to draft longer messages like PaperRater, but this one's actually built into Gmail itself. And so if you're using Google Apps for Business and you actually have that, that's what your primary account is, then like me, you can see up here in the right-hand corner, this is my email account for my company. So this is my account. I'm logged into Google Apps for Business, and I'm using this to write an email message. So I'm going to go ahead again, and I'm going to just type in some, lorem ipsum text, and the text is here now. I've typed out my email message. Let's pretend that it's an email. And under the add-ons area, Google has given us the ability to go ahead and extend the ability of Google Docs. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Get Add-ons. And in the Google Drive add-ons, Google has given us all kinds of really amazing abilities, from being able to create charts and translate text and so on and so forth. One of the really great tools is that they have this Pro Writing Aid, okay? And the Pro Writing Aid goes ahead and looks for, again, consistency and plagiarism and redundancies and grammar check and all sorts of other things. So here we are. I'm going to look at this little thing. I'm going to click on Install. I'm going to click Accept. And now it's actually installed within Google Docs here, the little Pro Writing add-on. You can see now it pops up and now it says, hey, whenever you want to use Pro Writing add-on, it's there and available for you right here under the add-ons. So here it is. You can see now when I hover over add-ons and drop down to Pro Writing Aid, it gives me a whole bunch of options for checking corporate wording checks. It would probably catch my my presentation today because I use the word best practices, and that's one of those corporate speak things. And so it would probably say, hey, you might not want to use that term because it's corporate speak. It can pick up cliches and redundancies. And again, you want to go down the list and see which are the areas where you might feel like you have weaknesses in your writing, especially in email. You want to be clear and concise and really get to the point with regard to the substance of your call to action. And this tool is really great for it. Okay, so say I go through all of these checks now, and now I have the email, right? Well, I have two options now. I can copy and paste this into my email program, or I can just go to File and then email collaborators. I can email people that I can attach to the document, or I can email the document as attachment. So I have lots of options in terms of being able to actually send the document directly to people from here as though it were an email. So all I have to do here is, instead of adding a message in here, all I have to do is add the recipient that I was sending it to, and then just make sure that I paste the item itself into the email message. And now, because it's my Google Apps for Business account, it will literally send the email, paste the email into the email message. It will send from me, and so it'll be my email address in the from line, and the to line will be the name of the document that I've created. So the subject would be the one of the subject that I've created for this document. I don't know why this is not giving me the ability to see the cancel. There we go. So in this case, the subject line would be the title of the document that I created. And since I can't seem to, there it goes. So I would just, in here, this would be the subject, okay? And so whatever I put in as the title of the document would be the subject. The body of the message would be the body of the email message, and there you go. So you could actually write all of these sort of longer email messages within here if you are using the Google Apps for Business tool. I really like that for sending sort of larger email messages that I want to use the Pro Writing Aid for. And just, sometimes there's just sort of, oh man, did I repeat myself too much with the same word? Did I use the wrong acronyms, or did I use too many acronyms in this particular email? You could just go through and really just clean up the writing very, very quickly using something like that and get going. All right, so those are the three tools: Paperator, the Ginger Chrome extension, as well as the Google Docs within Google Drive if you're using Google Apps for Business. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead into the presentation again, and hopefully it picks me up right back where I left off. Wonderful. Okay, so as I said before, we're going to start with your reason for writing up front, free of grammar and spelling errors, and those three tools that I talked about. Next up is bullet points and short paragraphs are really your friend. So very similar to the way in which journalists, they write in very short paragraphs. Sometimes 2 to 4 sentences is as much as they write in a paragraph, and they just keep writing in this short paragraphs because they know that it paces the person. It quickens our reading when we have shorter paragraphs. So in email especially, we really want to have short paragraphs. We want to bring people quickly through the material. Next up, we always want to use bullet points when we have any kind of unlisted items. So if we know that we have 3 points to make and there are 3 questions or whatever it might be, just put them in bullet points. There's no reason why you can't separate them so that visually it cues the person to what they need to do. They need to read those 3 points, and they need to either compare and contrast them. They need to either respond to them. There's 3 calls to action. Whatever it is, use bullet points when you can. All right, so that's really important as well. Okay. This is a really cool one. I'm going to jump out of here again for purposes of showing it, but the 5 sentences policy is this email concept. Actually, I'm not going to do it. If you just go to 5.sentenc.es, you will go to a website called 5 Sentences. 5 Sentences is all about the idea that we get too much email and the email's too long. So this person decided to write a policy that basically said, we're only going to send emails of 5 sentences or less. And in their email signature, it literally says, question, why is this email only 5 sentences? The answer, so that we send shorter email messages and receive shorter email messages in response, something to that effect. Okay, so it became a really interesting hit among corporate America, and now they have a 4, 3, and 2 sentences policy. So a lot of corporate folks have instituted this concept of having a policy of only sending 5, 4, 3, or 2 sentence emails. And think about how much email would be reduced and how quicker responses would become if you would practice only sending no more than 5, 4, 3, or 2 sentences in an email message. Really, really cool concept, and I think that some people could really do that in their businesses very, very easily. 5 sentences is a lot of information. I mean, you might write longer sentences, perhaps, but at the same time, you would be much more concise in terms of getting all of the data into those sentences and getting done with them. And that means the person who has to digest it and get back to you has far less to read and sees the pungency of each of the sentences and can quickly respond to you because they've gotten all the information up front. So think about the 5 sentences policy. I think it's really cool. And finally, when it comes to the body of the message, we really want to think about clear calls or calls to actions. We really want to think about, what does that person have to do? We told them right up front in the email why we're writing. I want you to be able to sign the sales contract. At the end of the email message, I have hopefully in the body of the message outlined the reasons why I think they should sign the sales contract. I end the statement with, I end the email message with, please, review and sign the contract based on the above. Okay, I want them to know exactly what it is that they need to do. Do they need to sign, date, and deliver a contract? Do they need to call me? Do they need to write that next report? Do they need to go to my website and sign up for something? What is that clear call to action? Don't presume people know what they're supposed to do once you've written to them. Okay, this is not challenging their intellect. This is literally a reality that sometimes we just have no idea what you're talking about when you go through the reasons for the reason you actually wrote me up front. Well, what do you want me to do from there? Sometimes people just are not aware. So feel free to, you must write a clear call to action when you get to the email ending. And remember, stick to as few calls to action as necessary. If you tell people to do 3 things, they're only likely to do 1 to 2 of them. Okay, so make sure that you are very clear about, this is the most important thing I need you to do to come out of this message. And while we're here in the body of the message, this is one of those times when I frequently get the question of, do I send 1 email message per subject, or do I put all of the subject or topics in 1 email message altogether? And really, this is going to come to the effect of knowing who you're writing. So, for example, I'm the type of person that if you want to get through to me and get a response, you should really send, granular topics and granular messages. So, short email with a specific topic. And if you send me, 2 or 3 emails, each of them being small decision points, then I'm much more likely to respond. If you send me an email with those 3 decision points together, and say one of them I need more time to think about, well, because they're all together in one, I'm less likely to respond to you about the other 2, which now can't move forward for you, because I need to spend the decision energy to figure out how to respond to you on that 3rd item. So from my perspective, I always like the idea of separating emails to one subject, one email, and one subject or topic to an email. And that way those things can be dealt with independently. And the same thing is for filing purposes, I file my email messages afterward, and I want to be able to look at them in their space without having other stuff muddying the conversation. So from my perspective, I like them small and granular. You might want to receive one message and have everything all bundle up in one, respond to all of them all at once, and get them back to people. That means you need to communicate how you like to be communicated with your business contacts, whether that be your staff, your vendors, your clients, whomever it might be. Tell them how you like to receive email messages so that both of you can mutually come to an understanding about how to communicate well. So often, the miscommunication and poor communication happens because they're not communicating. And communicating includes telling people how you want to receive information. This comes into play, I think, in an analogy that I can give is in romantic and dating relationships. If you're in a relationship where your spouse tells you that they only think you're romantic when you do things spontaneously for them that they end up liking, okay? Well, that puts a lot of pressure on you to be able to understand their individual needs and whims whenever they might have them. I'm a little bit of a different person. If you tell me exactly what you like, when you like it, well, guess what? You'll always get what you want. So in business, I think that more people should just be like me and make sure that you are telling people what you want. Because when you tell them what you want, you are much more highly likely of getting what you're looking for and satisfying your needs in business if you tell them how you want to be communicated. Okay, I'm done beating a dead horse on that one. And so that takes us over to email signatures. Email signatures are really the last thing people really see, and frequently something that people don't see at all in email messages, but they're really, really important when you need them. Have you ever been in a situation where you're late to lunch, or you are absolutely lost and you're trying to reach your lunch party, and you know that the last email that they sent was a couple of hours ago, and then you scroll through their email message and you can't find a phone number or a cell phone in which to reach them? It's absolutely infuriating because you know that that was just such a simple thing that could have happened so that you would have access to their contact information in that moment. Well, that's not the only reason why you would have an email signature. There are so many reasons why. You would have email signatures so that you can add and append information. Like in my email addresses right now, I have a link to my new book. I want to make sure that everyone in my company, when they send email messages out to folks, that people know that it's out there. It's out there to help them. Of course, I care about book sales, but I also care about helping small businesses. I wouldn't do this work if I didn't. And I want to make sure that people have access to knowing that it's out there and available to them. And so I want to put that in my email signature. But the other side is that I want to be able to broadcast and market my business, your businesses. You want to market your business using your email signatures as well. So it's also about marketing. It's about communicating. It's about making sure that people have the appropriate contact information available to them. This is the information that would normally sit in your letterhead. So in a physical correspondence, like a letter, you would have all of this information in your letterhead. So think about it from that perspective. What would I have on my letterhead? My phone number, my email address, my website, and some other identifying information. That's what would show up in your email signature, along with what normally sits in the closing salutation of your letter. So your name, title, the name of the company, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you have that in your email signature. A couple of tips about email signatures. Number one is that I use the Goldilocks Rule. Now, what's the Goldilocks Rule? Well, the Goldilocks Rule is a rule I created, which is the not too short but not too long email signature, okay? And this is one that I learned the hard way. So I was sending email messages out, and I had put a whole bunch of stuff in my email signature, not really thinking about it. I just thought, the more the merrier. And a colleague came to me afterward and said, I printed out your email message, and it basically took up a whole page just to print your email signature. Well, of course, I was sheepishly embarrassed, but it was a good lesson because I realized that the email signature was just too long. There is a point where there's just too much information. And there is an email signature that's just too short, which is that it lacks the substance that's required of a person expecting to have contact information from them. Your outbound email signature, the one that if you originated the message, you want a response and you want that person to get back to you. So you want to give them every means in which to get back to you, okay? So you might list a telephone number for your office line, as well as your mobile email address, so on and so forth. Keep giving them options, your Twitter profile, your LinkedIn profile. Give them all those options if you feel like those are mechanisms for them to want to get back to you, not just hitting reply on the email. However, when you receive email messages, those email signatures, which can be set as different than your normal email signature on outbound messages that you originate in your email software, those can be shorter because presumably the person already knows how to reach you, and you don't always want to give them all of the ways in which they can get back to you if you're responding to the message, okay? So it just depends on the way in which you want to interact with people. So I tend to put the same exact information in both of them, but some people will only put an email address and a mobile number in their response back to people, whereas they'll put all of their information in the outbound one that they originate in their software. It just depends on how you want to do it, okay? But I think that those are not too short, not too long. It's usually about 5 to 10 lines in an email signature, okay, which is name, your title or role in the company, the name of your company, maybe the tagline, and then email address, phone numbers, and website address. Okay, if you have a blog, you might want to add that. You might want to add a LinkedIn address in replacement of any of those other social media links that you might have. So think about what they are, and then try to figure out how you can also manifest them in a way that looks aesthetically pleasing. Okay, so again, when you look at it, you might want to put all the phone numbers on the same line and just put, TEL for the office or OFC for the office, MOB for mobile, or CEL for cell phone. Chunk them together so they look visually appealing, so that they're also on less lines and sort of more compact. Okay, so think about that in that way. ASCII only. Okay, so what's ASCII? ASCII is text only. They're characters that you're typing. So if the character isn't on your keyboard, that means if you're using those little smiley faces, they call them sometimes emoticon or emoji. If you're using Outlook and you use those smiley faces, the images, guess what I see on my side on my mobile phone? I see a J, literally a capital J. Don't use those if you're using Outlook and sending messages to people, because there will be random J's showing up at the ends of sentences in people's email messages, and it will potentially make them not aware of what's going on if they're not aware, like I am, that you are receiving a smiley face from Outlook. But email programs don't necessarily always communicate the same photos to one another, like emoji or emoticon. So use only ASCII characters. Don't attach images like logos or anything else like that in your email addresses, because email signatures, because the systems don't necessarily interpret them on either side as being anything. Sometimes they mark them as spam because they think that they're trying to subvert and send some kind of malware, malicious software to your program through these images. So don't do that. Only use ASCII. Next up is keep them up to date. So if a phone number is out of date, if an email address is old, if your office address has changed, make sure that you're regularly looking at milestones in your business, and when those milestones happen, that you go ahead and update those and in your email signature, okay? And so I wanted to go over the email charter. And so the email charter is this thing that this person created. I'm not even sure who it is, but if you go to emailcharter.org, there are these 10 rules to reverse the email spiral. And so this person came up with this idea that there's obviously we're drowning in email, as the website says, and trying to reduce the number of hours. And so I'm just going to quickly go through these 10, but either way, you can go to emailcharter.org and sort of digest these a little bit more. But there's some really good ones in here and ones that I sort of disagree with, so I'm going to read them over for you. But this is the website, emailcharter.org. I'm going to head back over to the slides up. But here we go. So number 1, respect recipients' time. This is the fundamental rule I'm quoting here. As the message sender, the onus is on you to minimize the time your email will take to process, even if it means taking more time at your end before sending. This is why I said you need to sort of think about the email and think about all those things in the background, so that when you come to the email message, you've spent more time, yes. You've had to slow yourself down, but in the long term, the person on the other end is going to appreciate you spending the time to have crafted a good email message, an effective email message, so that they can address the issue and respond effectively. Respond the way that you want them to. Number 2, short or slow is not rude. So he says, quote, let's mutually agree to cut each other some slack. Given the email load we're all facing, it's okay if replies take a while coming and if they don't give detailed responses to all your questions. No one wants to come over as brusque, so don't take it personally. We just want our lives back, end quote. Number 3, celebrate clarity. Start with a subject line that clearly labels the topic and maybe include the status category. He gives the options of info, action, time-sensitive, low priority, and he says use crisp, muddle-free sentences. I would agree with that. Next up, he says quash open-ended questions. So for number 4, he says don't use questions like thoughts, question mark. He also says even well-intended but open questions like how can I help you or how can I help may not be helpful. Email generosity, I quote, email generosity requires simplifying, easy-to-answer questions. Quote, can I help best by A, calling, B, visiting, or C, staying right out of it, end quote. See what I mean? It's like give people easy questions and they'll give you direct answers back. Number 5, slash surplus CCs. So basically don't copy people that you don't have to, right? Number 6, tighten the thread. So it says here, quote, some emails depend for their meaning on context, which means it's usually right to include the thread being responded to. But it's rare that a thread should extend to more than 3 emails. Before sending, cut what's not relevant, or considering making a phone call instead, end quote. So here you can see again, is email the appropriate medium for me to be able to get the message across. 7, attack attachments. Don't use graphic files as logos or signatures that appear as attachments. Time is wasted trying to see if there's something to open. Even worse is sending text as an attachment when it could have been included in the body of the email, end quote. Number 8, give these gifts. And he uses the acronyms EOM and NNTR. Quote, if your email message can be expressed in a half dozen words, just put it in the subject line, followed by EOM, end of message. It stands for end of message. And then this saves the recipient having to actually open the message. Ending a note with NNTR, which stands for no need to respond, is a wonderful act of generosity. Many acronyms confuse as much as help, but these 2 are golden and deserve wide adoption, end quote. Then he gives you number 9, cut contentless responses. So quote here, you don't need to reply to every email, especially not those that are themselves clear responses. An email saying, thanks for your note, I'm in, does not need you to reply, great. That just cost someone another 30 seconds, end quote. And number 10, quote, if we all agreed to spend less time doing email, we'd all get less email. Consider calendaring half days at work where you can't go online, or a commitment to email-free weekends, or an auto response that refers to this email charter. And don't forget to smell the roses, end quote. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Tracy, and we'll answer any questions that anyone might have.
Well, Ray, right now we don't have any questions.
I always love that. I've always answered everybody's questions.
You did answer everyone's questions. Well, while I wait and see if anybody types up any questions, I will take a moment just to go over some, I guess, housekeeping. I want to thank everyone for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Virginia SBDC's website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email on the webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in that email. Please help us to continue to improve our training by filling out that evaluation. If you want to fill out the evaluation now, I went ahead and put that in the chat window, and you can go ahead and fill that out. And we don't have a question, but somebody just said thank you. It was very useful information. Actually, several.
Glad to hear.
Several people saying that.
Wonderful. Glad to hear.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, so we will go ahead and end the webinar. We will see you next on September 4th for managing your time and team using Google Calendar. Thanks, everybody, for participating today.